I look down and my hands all bubbling. Flesh drips, it's off-putting and quite troubling. In a short while there's only bone left. I flex my fingers, the joints creak and groan. Next I freak out and scream cause my hand's in my face. It roots about, pulls a tooth out of place and taps it on my forehead like, ha, you're dead. Plants it like a seed and the earth bleeds red. The color spreads and out of the ground sprouts fingers, skeletal.
On March 27, 1993, two friends, 9-year-old Jonathan and 13-year-old Charlie, left home for a bike ride on a beautiful March morning and never returned. They would get tortured, essayed, and murdered by a predator with a horrible past. This story is quite brutal and graphic, so viewer discretion is advised. It is a terrible story, so I am warning you up front. Welcome to the Murder She Shed, the place. We honor the dead, right from my little she shed, and my name is Holly. Before we begin, make sure you hit that like and subscribe so I can be found by other people in this big YouTube world. I mean, it's big in here. A person can get lost, and often do, so make sure you just look out for a gal and hit that like and subscribe. I'd love you for it, and you can see all my free true crime videos if you would like. If not, then I'm sorry. Charles Keever, 13, and Jonathan Sellers, 9, had spent the day of March 27, 1993, goofing off and having some fun like young boys do. They went to the arcade together and then to a pet adoption center. Around lunch, they decided to ride their bikes to get a hamburger at Raleigh's hamburger stand in San Diego, California. Then they rode their bikes to Otay River, where they had built a fort that they would often play in. It began to get dark and the two boys had not returned. Their families became very concerned. It was not like the boys to stay out this late. Their families began to search the neighborhood. Jonathan's brother told their mother about the riverbed trail where they liked to bike. He did not think to tell her about the fort in the riverbed that the boys would crawl into like a little cave. He and his mother went to the trail but stopped short of the fort. It rained that night and the following day, but it did not stop the searchers for looking for Jonathan and Charlie. 2 days later, a man was taking a jog along the river when he stopped to look at a camp-like thing in the bushes. He would make a gruesome discovery. As he looked inside, he saw two boys, one hanging from a rope by his neck on a tree branch, one lying on the ground and both naked from the waist down except for socks. Both boys appeared deceased. He quickly ran to call 911. Officers knew that this discovery could be the body of the two missing boys. Officers arrived at the fort. The fort was 10 feet wide and 12 feet long, made out of canopy of castor bean plants and tumbleweeds, but it only had a 2-foot height opening to enter. Jonathan was found wearing a blue and white sweatshirt and socks, but otherwise nude from the waist down. His body was suspended by a branch approximately 3.5 feet above the ground via a rope tied around the neck and with his knees and knuckles on the ground. A second rope was tied around his ankle, and there was a gag of a towel and tape around his chin. Charlie was found laying face down, wearing a hooded sweatshirt and socks, but also otherwise nude from the waist down. His body had a yellow rope and white cord around his neck, similar to those found on Jonathan. There appeared to be dried blood on Charlie's genital area. The rope and cord on Charlie's neck were drawn up tight and the skin was swollen underneath. Jonathan's rope had been looser than Charlie's. He also had tape residue and adhesive marks on his cheeks. Underneath Charlie's head, officers found a pile of neatly folded clothing, including the boys' shirts, jeans, and shoes. Other evidence collected at the crime scene included 2 cigarette butts on the path connecting the fort to the main bike path. The two boys' bicycles were found chained together and covered with tumbleweeds, approximately 30 feet north of the fort. Charlie's autopsy revealed evidence of pre-mortem strangulation. Injury to his backside private area consistent with penetration by a foreign object, and bruising and abrasions on his front private area caused by being bitten multiple times. The ME stated that these injuries appeared to have occurred while Charlie was still alive and would have been very painful. Charlie's cause of death was asphyxia, which would have taken as long as 5 minutes. Jonathan also revealed evidence of being strangled, and he had died from asphyxia. The ME described 2 different ligature marks on the neck. The first was accompanied by small vertical scratches consistent with the person trying to pull the ligature off of his neck. The police collected assay swabs from both bodies. An initial analysis in April 1993 revealed a single sperm cell from the swab of skin on Jonathan's frontal private area. Their killer would not be found until 2001 when advancements in DNA came about. A subsequent analysis in 2001 using more advanced techniques revealed sperm samples on the front and back private area exterior swab from Jonathan and an oral swab from Charlie, and they were entered into CODIS. The killer at the time of the murders was 31 years old, and he was Scott Thomas Erskine, who was currently in prison for RAPE committed 6 months after the boys' murders. This predator Scott had a horrific past and should have been in prison before these boys were murdered. Scott grew up in Southern California. His father was a drunk and would beat his mother as well as the children. His mother was very passive. When he was 5 years old, he darted into traffic on the Pacific Coast Highway in Long Beach and was hit by a station wagon. He remained in a coma for 60 hours. Although physically he appeared recovered, he frequently complained to his mother about headaches, and he experienced blackout moments where he could not remember what he was last doing. When Scott was 10 and his little sister was 6, him and a couple of his friends took her to the loft of the family's barn and made her perform. By the time Scott was 10, psychiatrists had prescribed him both Haldol and Ritalin because he was out of control. But the medications were causing him to fall asleep at school, so his mother took him off them after only 2 months. Around this time, Scott's mother got a phone call reporting that Scott and his friends had been taking his sister and the other girls into the barn and initiating them taking off their clothes. At 13, Scott was diagnosed with dissociative neurosis, organic brain syndrome, with a history of trauma and borderline psychosis. Approximately 4 years later, when his sister was 11, she woke up to her brother touching her. Weirdly enough, his next assault involved a fort. One of his sister's friends had come over to the family's home, and Scott invited the friend into a fort he had made. Once inside the fort, Scott threatened her with a knife, pulled off her bottoms, and stuck his fingers and sticks or twigs into her privates, and then forced her to perform. When Scott was 15 and a girl who was 12 were walking home, Scott put a knife to her throat and forced her into a drainage ditch. He forced her to take off her clothes and then her every way possible. Afterwards, he walked her home still holding his knife to her neck. He was sent to the California Youth Authority for this assault. Their record shows that he was found eligible for placement in a unit for the mentally ill, but was never admitted to that unit. Upon his release, Scott was placed on parole and sent to live in a foster home. After 6 weeks, he left for a job at a residential camp. On the way to that job, Scott was arrested for essaying a 14-year-old boy. The boy said Scott approached him outside of his school and asked him where the restroom was. As they walked behind the main school building on the way to the restroom, Scott became very angry and pushed the boy against the wall. Scott violently threatened the boy with essay and slapped him in the private area, also punched him in the face over 20 times. He then sat on top of the young boy and choked him until he passed out. When the boy woke up, Scott was shaking him and asking him if he was all right, as though he had just found him like that. Scott was arrested at the scene and served 4 years in prison. While Scott was in prison and only 19 years old, he essayed another prisoner. When Scott got married in 1988, he choked his 6-month pregnant wife and kicked her in the stomach. She left him after that. In 1993, Scott invited a woman who was waiting for the bus into his home and held her hostage for several days, repeatedly essaying her before letting her go. He was quickly arrested. He was convicted of multiple charges, including rape and kidnapping, and sentenced to 70 years in prison. As a convicted offender, Scott had to submit his DNA to a database, which is how his DNA was entered into CODIS. In April 2004, he was sentenced to death for the murders of Jonathan and Charlie, but it would not be the only murders he was convicted of. While awaiting the start of his trial, Florida investigators matched his DNA in the unsolved case of 26-year-old Renee Baker, who was murdered on June 23, 1989, just 4 years before the boys had been murdered. Baker drowned when Scott broke her neck after essaying her. He then left her near the bank of the Intercoastal Waterway in Palm Beach. He had lived in Florida during this time. Florida authorities suspect Scott may be linked to other unsolved homicides. So our boy Scott is definitely a serial killer. He's killed at least 3, possibly even more. In August of 2004, he was charged for Renee's murder. In 2020, Scott became one of a dozen California death row inmates to die in the span of less than 2 months as a result of a COVID-19 outbreak in San Quentin State Prison. After Scott died, Jonathan's mom spoke about it, and this lady has such a beautiful spirit. I wanted you guys to hear a piece of her interview.
You know, when they called me and I heard him say that he was dead, I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. I had no words, and it was just quiet. And then finally I got out, how did he die? And he told me that he couldn't tell me. They didn't know, but I'd find out later on that afternoon. And it was overwhelming. I was just, again, long pauses because I didn't know what to say. My emotions was all over the place. I started crying because, again, it's just so much. And then I just felt totally confused because my emotions were everywhere. And then I was glad that he was dead. And then I started feeling guilty as a Christian. You know, I've never been glad that somebody's dead before. So it was all this mix of emotions going on that I had to call my pastor because I just didn't know how to feel about this. And he thanked the Lord for Pastor Trent at North Coast Community Church. Absolutely fabulous. He helped me to just process it and tell me it was okay. You know, I called one of the members of our prayer group, Beverly from the same church, and she's like, it's okay. I don't blame you. It's normal, and this is fine, to feel this way, this relief. And it just helped me because as a Christian, I've come too far walking with the Lord to lose it now over the death of him. I don't want to do anything wrong. My salvation means too much to me. And the Lord is the only thing that got me through this got me this far. People talk about my strength. No, it's my trust. It's my faith in God that got me through. And I don't want to lose it now. It means so much to me. And so I'm thankful that I have had this time now to process it and to talk to different ones that could help support me through my mixed emotions and the guilt, to realize I don't have to feel guilty. I can be glad that he is no longer here. I can be glad that Maria and I don't have to worry about getting another phone call about him being up for appeal or anything else. It's over. And I thank the Lord for that.
This monster will never hurt another child. I can't imagine losing a child, much less in such a horrific way. There could be nothing worse than a monster ending your child's life in such a brutal way. Much love and prayers to the family, because the pain of something like this would never end. Even though it's been a while, you would never get over something like this. It's just heartbreaking. Anyway, he's simply an evil monster, and I'm glad he is gone and no more. I don't know what the freak's going on here. Welcome to the Murder She Shed. The Murder She Shed. The place where your true crime addiction gets fed. Look at that. Jeez Louise, what's up with your hair today, Holly? Before we begin, make sure I feel like I'm too tall. If it's wrong, I'm sorry, California people, but Google is saying Oti, so we're going to go with that. Me and my husband went to this restaurant to eat, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but yeah, well, I got stuck on the bathroom door at the restaurant. You're like, how in the world does someone get stuck on the bathroom door? Well, just leave it up to me. Only I could do this because, okay, I don't know if you're going to know what I'm talking about. Maybe I can find a picture, but the doorknob was the kind that does like this. It's a long doorknob instead of the round one, and it's like a hook that you push down. So when I come out of the bathroom, somehow my belt loop, these that's made for the belts on your pants, these little loops that come out, slid into the door handle, like latched onto it, This is hard to explain. But anyway, here I am hooked to the door, and I don't know how I managed it, but I could not get off. It like hooked into it and it wouldn't come off. Here I am stuck to the bathroom door, and this dude walks up and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, well, somehow I've got stuck to the bathroom door. I didn't want him to help me, but I was like, this is too private, like it's like on my pants. Like, I don't want him playing with my butt, okay? This dude playing with my butt. So I'm like, could you go get my husband to help me? And I tell him, you know, what he looks like. And my husband, that poor guy, he's used to my misfortunes. He just don't even say nothing. He just gets up and goes, okay, where's she at? So he walks back there and he has to unhook me off the bathroom door. But he is laughing his head off at me as usual. And I am so red. I am so embarrassed because people have started coming to the bathroom by now. They can't get in the bathroom because I am hooked to the bathroom door. I do the stupidest things. You just guys don't even know. You don't see half of the stupid. I don't even put half of the stupid on here because it's too embarrassing. Just really embarrassing. I just try to control my stupid and hold it back and pray to God it don't happen in public, you know. My rabbit cage is actually being built right over here. I'm building a first floor down there, and then I'm going to make a ramp that comes up into their box here. And then I'll have this play area over here. Plus, I mean, I'm going to let them out all the time. They'll probably be running in my she shed all the time, too. And it's made to actually look like the outside of my she shed. I'm going to make a little door. And anyway, I love to build. That's just something I love. I love to just make new things and build. And I'm always building something, or I'm trying to, either painting or building. I just love to create things, I guess you'd say. I'm just a creator of weird things. And they're usually weird, just like me. Here's a nasty one. Let's go back here where they can see you. He been four-wheeling this morning and he was so nasty. He was so nasty. He was so nasty. Just say bye. Just say bye.
I look down and my hands all bubbling. Flesh drips, it's off-putting and quite troubling. In a short while there's only bone left. I flex my fingers, the joints creak and groan. Next I freak out and scream cause my hand's in my face. It roots about, pulls a tooth out of place and taps it on my